It's finally here, Planet Coaster 2, and today we will be building the entrance of the new project called Mythos. And the building of this entrance took only 6 to 8 hours. Yay! And it's not even finished. But anyways, before we actually get started, don't forget to like and subscribe button if you want to see more. Now let the chaos begin. So yeah, I wasn't lying when I said this took 6 to 8 hours, and again, it's also not even finished because I only finished the front, so it's basically a facade, and then we will finish the back side of it later. There's actually not even a parking lot yet because this build took really long. I mean, the video is like around 40 minutes, and that is with me cutting down stuff. But anyways, what's Mythos going to be? Well, basically it's going to be a theme park that's slightly realistic, but then also doesn't really have a budget because I like just building wacky, insane things, and it doesn't really work if you're thinking of a budget. Like, sometimes I will make things slightly more realistic thinking of a little bit of a budget, but most of the time it's just going to be building free and wild without a budget. So we might end up with some ridiculous buildings, because Mythos is going to be, well, as the name implies, it's going to be about mythology and like folklore and such. So it's going to have, of course, a Greek and Norse area, because I mean those are themes in the games, and I also just like them. Greek and Norse mythology. We're not going to make Roman mythology because that's basically a copy-paste of Greek mythology with some additions. We're going to stay with the Greek mythology. And then there's also going to be Japanese, some others. I'm really thinking of like, should I go just Egyptian or like Arabian with like 1,001 nights? But we will think about that later when we get to it. And then there's also Arthurian, because I just want to build medieval stuff, and like, it kind of works. You know, King Arthur is like a legend or a myth, so it kind of works with Mythos. But yeah, so basically, just to wrap that all up, Mythos is going to be like a mythology, folklore, all of that kind of stuff, kind of theme park, which is going to have like Japanese, Greek, Norse, Arthurian, and I'm still slightly debating on like what the final one is going to be, either Egyptian or Arabian, because Egyptian would be fun, but I think I'm more comfortable with Arabian, and it's just going to, like, either way, it's going to be really different compared to all of the other their build styles and just mythology and such. Now, I will say, I will probably not get things 100% accurate because I'm not specialized in mythology or anything. I am just like, I like mythology, and that's where my knowledge usually ends. Like, there's a little bit of looking for things, but it's not going to be 100% perfect. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. I will make mistakes, and if I do make mistakes, do call them out, because I'm a bumbling idiot. Anyway, so yeah, that's basically going to be the entire thing. However, there's also the main street, or the starting area, which is, I've basically called that Mythos. Like, if you were to name all of the areas, Mythos is pretty much the starter area, but it's also the name of the entire park. But the starter area is basically going to be Versailles, which I probably am mispronouncing, but I think I'm mispronouncing Mythos as a name in itself. But it's basically Versailles or Baroque architecture mixed with steampunk. So it's going to be this, I mean, what you're seeing right now a bit. So it's going to just be slightly different. I might have it be influenced a little bit by all of the other themes and mythologies that we're going to be drawing inspiration from. But I just wanted like a really standout starter area or main street that kind of works, and I like building this style. and I never really get to build this style otherwise. Because when it comes to Greek architecture and such, I mean, I don't think any of the mythologies, maybe Arthurian, but most of the mythologies or the themes that I'm going for don't really vibe well with a main street, because you usually have like really like set lines in there, whereas with like Greek mythology or Japanese or Egyptian, it's a little bit more loose. I mean, you could probably, well, you definitely could transform those themes into like main street buildings, but it's a little bit more, you're going to have to stretch the building styles a lot more. So that's why I decided, alright, we're just going steampunk. It's totally not just because I saw a picture on Pinterest and I was just like, yep, my brain is not going to allow any other style besides this. It's definitely not that. It's definitely because other things. But yeah, it also just like stretching the other teams too much. Yeah. And because the main street is such like, I mean, steampunk and baroque, it's going to really stand out against all of the other themed areas. But then because of it being like a very different theme, all of the other areas will also very much stand out. So this build or this project, like Mythos, is basically going to be like 6 mini projects in one. And I already want to build a coaster, but there's usually no coasters in the main streets. So I'm just like, oh, are we going to immediately, like for the next video, immediately going to go into like the Arthurian area because it's connected or it's like adjacent to the main street and I can build coasters there? We might do that. And then I will just have to figure out, alright, where does it go? Because the easy way to build anything in Planet Zoo, Planet Coaster is, at least for me, is to see it as a puzzle. And it's a lot easier to build this puzzle if you're going for like adjacent pieces. Instead of being like, oh, this tree is there and it's not connected to anything. I have no idea where it actually precisely goes. And then you have to figure out the puzzle around that. And then chaos ensues. But my brain just doesn't want me to, finish the entrance. It's probably because I spent 8 hours on an entrance, didn't even finish it, and now my brain is just like, yeah, I want to build something else. I don't want to look at this building. We will get to that later. But yeah, so the next video might actually be just a coaster. It might also be like a, what is it called? A flat ride. I have to learn all of the words. I mean, I barely remember all of the animals in Planet Zoo. And now I have to remember the names of coasters and flat rides and everything. Yeah, there are some coasters that could potentially work in the main street. Not because they would work in a main street, but because they work with the theme of the main street. Where it's just like, oh yeah, because it's kind of steampunky, a coaster could kind of work. But we will have to figure that out later. Now, when it comes to Planet Coaster 2, what are my thoughts on it? I definitely for me, the biggest learning curve was all of the buttons. Because, if you know Planet Zoo, if you know Planet Coaster, you kind of know, oh, I have to press these buttons to, select things, to select multiple things and such. And it's not that it's very different, but it's just oh yeah, instead of shift, you press I or something like that. So that just took some learning. And then there's also, of course, resizing, which it's very handy. I'm just going to say that, because there's a lot of pieces where it's just oh, I want this to just be a little bit larger, or need to do this a little bit smaller. Or, ooh, I like this shape, but I want it to be a different size. And usually in Planet Coaster 1 or Planet 2, that was the end of it because but it was just like, ooh, I want to use this window, but it needs to be larger. Yay, I can now use the window. I also made a giant clock because steampunk. That's what we're working on right now. Unless editing Poison completely screws up the voiceover and makes it desync with the footage, but well, that usually actually happens. Editing Poison and voiceover Poison are basically two different people. Yeah, pretty much. Usually it's because it happens on different days. Like I do a voiceover one day and then the next day I do the editing. And then I have the memory of a goldfish, so good job, Poison. There we go. But yeah, I basically made a giant clock because steampunk. I really wanted it to actually be like the opening times. So if like the park opens at, I don't know, 9 and it closes at, I don't know, 10, 8, 6, something like that. I really wanted that to be like visible on the clock, but then I would basically have a sphere on top of the actual entrance. And the entrance was already big, and I didn't think like, oh, how am I going to make this work? So it's basically from 9 to 3 is what you can actually see here, because I just wanted a dome. But it has the idea of a clock, so I'm happy with that. Also, somebody actually already saw this on Reddit or pointed it out on Reddit, but yes, the entrance is inspired by the Antwerp train station, because it looks pretty and it's the exact style that I want to go for, and it has a slightly whimsical feel. Like it's an official building, but it looks really pretty and it just feels like it wouldn't be that out of place if it was like in a fairy tale or like some kind of legend. So, yes. I've always looked at like the Antwerp train station and was just like, yeah, that would work really well actually also in a theme park. Either as the entrance or as a hotel. I might actually end up building a hotel next to the entrance. It's just that it works really well. So, yeah. I also later thought of like, oh, we can use like the animatronic pieces, because you can pretty much build your own animatronic or like your own movable scenery or moving scenery. I could have actually used that to actually make the clock, you know, with the, how do you call it, the pointers, you know, the things that point to the numbers of the hours and the minutes. I have no idea what the word for it is. I will probably remember right after finishing the voiceover, but that's just how my brain works. Sometimes I know very difficult words and other times it's just like you barely know English. The worst case is when I also actually forget the Dutch word, and then it's just like, you went from 2 languages to 0. Have fun with that. But yeah, so the entire entrance is basically inspired or is like a slight modification of the Antwerp train station. But I wanted to also have like side wings to it, because right now it only has 4 entrances or like 4 actual entrance facility pieces. And I just wanted to have it be a little bit larger and then have like maybe a separate entrance for groups or like for special events, or if it's like really busy they can open entrances. It just felt a little bit like, with the size that Mythos might become, I felt like having only 4 entrances would be a little bit too small, and then would feel a bit out of place, where it's just like, yeah, you have this huge theme park and this tiny entrance. That's not going to work, because then you will have giant queues for the entrance. And then when the park closes, you will have giant queues going out. And then you will have too many people too close together, and it creates a danger zone. And you want the people to kind of spread out and have like multiple ways of access. But anyways, so another thing when it comes to figuring out Planet Coaster 2. I need to remember to say 2 after it. But another thing that I had to remember and had to learn when it comes to Planet Coaster 2 is another catalog of building pieces. Because one of the great things, or one of the things that makes it easy to build, is knowing all of the pieces. And I bet you if you ask any content creator or anyone who posts these like ridiculously amazing buildings, they basically have all of the pieces in the game memorized. Like, I will fight for my plaster blocks in Planet Zoo. I know I can use them everywhere. I also know what pieces they work well with. And I pretty much know every piece and just how I could make them work. And then, yes, as already implied, I have like a favorite piece, which I know is very versatile. And then when you go into a new game, like there's some pieces that go over that were in Planet Zoo and now are also in Planet Coaster 2. But then it's with the resizing, they become more versatile. But then there's also like 99% or 95% of the pieces are like completely new. And then you have to kind of figure out, alright, this is a piece that I can use for these and these things. And it gets set in the mental catalog of like where I can use it for. And then you do that with all of the other pieces. Yes, I remember all of the pieces in Planet Zoo. Do I remember the English language? No, because priorities, I guess. But yeah, when it came to the actual building of the entrance, like throughout building the entrance, I already started to become more and more familiar with building, with all of the pieces. I still, for some reason, like the resizing is in the advanced move tool. I still click on the piece and then there's like where you can change the colors, there's a tab for that. And then there's another tab with, I think it's like scenery scores and such. But you have to press X to go to advanced move. For some reason I keep clicking the other tab with the scenery rating instead of pressing X and going to the resizing thing. I just keep going to that tab when I want to resize things. And then it's just like, oh wait, I have to go into advanced move and it's like the fourth option there. Yeah. However, another thing that's really nice with the resizing tool is you're not just able to resize a piece, you can select a building and make it tiny. Now, of course, because all of the pieces have like different limits on how like small or big they can get, you will get a scrunched up building if you just drag it all the way down to, for most pieces it's 50%. But if you have like a dome and you want a smaller dome on top, you can actually try and resize it, and sometimes it works, sometimes you need to just have like slight modifications. And if you want a really tiny dome from an already tiny dome, then you probably will have to build a new one. Because then it's just going to look like scrunched up paper. But anyways, so as I said before, I wanted to have like wings attached to the entrance or the main building of the entrance to have more than 4 entrances. Yeah, there's 2 versions of this building. Because I originally wanted like these wings, they only have like a ground floor or 1 story if you count or don't count the ground floor. I don't know. I don't make sense here for a bit. But for like an entire night, I spent building like multiple floors on top of these wings. And then I realized, because of the height, it actually made the main building look smaller. It made it look less impressive. Whereas now I've made it that the wings of the main entrance are only like 1 story tall. It made the main building stand out a lot more because the contrast with the heights made it stand out more. And then I just wanted to have a little nook with a statue in it, because why not? I really like this is the one thing that I would love in Planet Zoo as well, is I like having human or human-like statues. Because yeah, it's nice to have animal statues, but then having like some human statues, in this case like this Greek statue, it's just nice. And like in zoos you also have like statues maybe of like big donors or like important people to the zoo that will have like a statue or like a bust or something like that. And then you could also probably use the statues in other ways. But here it was just nice to have a statue. Now, I also need to probably explain like, oh yeah, why is Mythos or like this main street Baroque and like steampunky, or at least why is it that? Besides it just being like, oh, I wanted a different theme. I also like the idea that Mythos is like this sort of hub of like scholars and such who have set up portals to all of the other themed areas. So they made the portal to like Greek mythology and such. And I like the idea of those portals not being just like purely magical. I like it when there's like a slight mechanical vibe to it. It's not because I just want to have like a lot of clocks and like golden gears and such. It's totally because of like, you know, having the mechanical vibe to things. But that's why the steampunk is there. Because I just wanted to have something that's very different and also kind of works with like the story that I have in mind. Now here's the thing, there's not going to be like a big story. Like I'm not going to think of like, oh yeah, this coaster was built around that time and because of that it looks like this. It's probably not going to have like such a thing going on where everything sort of chronologically makes sense. But I like to have like main story points of like the main street is connected to all of the themed areas because of this, story wise. Actually physically wise it's just going to be this is pretty and I wanted to build this at that time. There's not really that much of a deeper meaning. Like sometimes I might make rides interact a little bit story wise or like theming wise, where things kind of flow into each other, which will most likely happen with a lot of coasters because they will probably have like distinct theming compared to just regular areas. So they might bleed into other areas. But main story wise, there's not going to be like, oh yeah, this ride over in the Japanese area connects to that ride in the Greek area. I'm thinking of keeping the themed areas kinda separate. But anyway, so as I said, this wing of the entrance used to have two, well, actually, if you count the ground floor, it was 3 stories, otherwise 2 stories. And as I said, it just sort of made the main building feel tiny, like absolutely tiny. And it made the main building feel a lot less impressive. So I made it smaller, and I don't know, I think that the actual building that we're building right now is actually inspired by, I think, an opera house. I just took away a few stories. I just took, oh yeah, I like this roof, I like the ground floor, and we're going to smash them together. Which is going to also happen with some buildings on the parking lot, because here's the thing, when it comes to building entrances, there's a lot of things that kind of come together there. You will have restrooms, you might have lockers, you will have like a first aid, there will be like an information point for, and there will be like maybe lost and found. Like there's a lot of things that you will find near an entrance. Toilets on both sides I also want to just include. Like you will have a toilet outside and usually one inside. So when it comes to building the entrance, there's not a toilet yet. There is ticket booths. I actually did make ticket booths. They're not functional, but they look like they would be functional, which is the main thing. And there is entrances. That's it. I also like to think that this is not a hotel, but this is like the office, because a lot of things, of course, needs to be like when it comes to like data and like just administrative work. And I just like the idea of somebody going to work at Mythos and like their office is in like one of the spires. And you just look outside and you see all of the people and it just sounds nice. Maybe the office is like, well, I don't think cruel, but maybe the work is like grueling and, you know, there's just a lot of work. But you work in a nice place. But anyway, so I did remember to put doors on the wings. They're not fully attached yet to the building because that's the back side of the building, and I already spent 8 hours just building the building, so didn't do that. I do have ideas for the toilet building, where I wanted to be attached to like the right wing of the main entrance, looking at it from the entrance and not from the park. I think it would be nice there. And then maybe later reserve like space for like a hotel on the left side. But then I'm also thinking like, how big do I need to make that hotel? I mean, here's the thing. Before any one of you get your hopes up, hotels are not in Planet Coaster 2. Or I'm an idiot and I didn't see it. Because I also forgot to make my own character. Like you can do this with all of the Planet games where you make your own character. And you can actually show up in different or in other people's zoos or theme parks. I actually don't know if that's a thing in Planet Coaster 2, but it was in all of the other Planet games. Yeah, I forgot to do that. Or was it just not accessible right now because of early access? Because this was built during early access. I am only half a week late. So that's already an achievement, because usually I'm a full week or 2 weeks late when it comes to early access stuff. But now it was only half a week. And this time it was just because I couldn't stop building. Here's the thing, I just felt like every time I was just like, yeah, this is not finished yet. Or it's not at a place yet where I want to show it off. So I kept postponing it. This video, if I had just been like, alright, we finished the main building. That's going to be it. We're going to do the rest later. I have like the entrance plaza and such. But if I didn't do the entrance plaza and such, this video would have been out probably on time. But I just wanted to do an entrance area. And then was like, oh, I want to decorate these spires. And I want to do this and that. Yeah. In the end, I'm really happy with it. I'm also very happy that it's done. Like, it took a lot of brain power to build this. So, I think the last things that I did for the main building were the main spire. I also wanted to make like a tiny clock, because that's like this bit in the middle of the main building that's kind of jetting out, or just is like a little bit like pushed out. And I thought like, oh, I want like a smaller clock on the roof there, because the big clock that the dome is made of doesn't show like the entrance and or the opening times. And I thought like, oh yeah, with the smaller clock I could actually make that work. There's actually no clocks in Planet Coaster 2. I looked for a clock piece. There's none. So you will just stay in Mythos forever, or Planet Coaster 2 forever. Because there's no time in Planet Coaster 2. Well, there is time, it's just there's no clock piece. So the peeps in the game have no idea what time it is. Only you. Which kind of feels like The Sims. Anyway, so then it was just finishing the spire, which I'm so happy with it. Like, there's buildings where it's just like, yeah, it's good, but I could probably do better. Here, I'm just so happy with how it all turned out, how it all started to kind of work together. Like, when you build the first wall, it's impossible to see how things would connect, and it is very hard to make things connect. But as soon as you come to like this place where you're like finishing off things, where you're placing dormers or like finishing like the centerpieces on top of the spires, I don't know what they're called, but I'm just calling them centerpieces right now. Then you start seeing how the building starts coming together, how it starts working as one, and that's when you get the most joy out of it. And before that time, at least for me, like speaking of how I approach building, and before the time when it all starts snapping together, I'm really unsure of whatever I'm building. It's just like, is this going to work? It might not work. And then you start second guessing, and then the process starts really slowing down for me. But as soon as it's like final stretches, or well, final, this is half of the building only done. I would actually say it's 1/3. But when you're in that final stretch, that's when things start going real fast, because then it all starts connecting at least for me again, in my brain it starts connecting and it starts flowing seamlessly, and it's just like, oh yeah, of course this needs to be built because it works like this, and this needs to be built because it works like that. And it's just an amazing feeling. It's just like a boost of adrenaline of just like, yes, this works perfectly now. And then I had to make a fence. We don't have like classical style fences, so I had to make my own. I first thought, oh, I'm going to use the trident, but it's way too big of a piece, even if you size it down. And then there were these, I have no idea what these are actually called. But because, you know, it's a fence that's supposed to keep people out, I attach spears on it so that they have points. This is again the great thing of being able to resize things, because these spears are usually just regular size, like, or peep sized. And before any questions what's peeps, I just call the guests that you will have in Planet Coaster 2 peeps. But they're kind of like, you know, peep sized. They are, as you would say in real life, human-sized, like regular spear-sized. But if you make them tiny, they can really work well for points on top of your fence, and that keeps people out, because that's painful if you fall on it or want to climb it. I don't think they're sharp, but you know, they're deterrents from people getting into the park when you don't want to. And then it was just building planters, finishing off the plaza, starting the plaza. And when I first played Planet Coaster 2, because I had like a little bit of a tutorial one, a preview of it, I really couldn't figure out how the pathing worked, because I got so used to the Planet Zoo pathing, which is still an option in Planet Coaster 2. You still can use how the paths works in Planet Coaster, in Planet Zoo. You can still use that way of building paths in Planet Coaster 2. And I did use it for the paths because I'm so used to it, and I'm an old man who doesn't learn new tricks. But when it comes to building plazas, it's so easy to build them now, because you just drag or just paint where the plaza needs to be and it fills it in, and it's really nice. I just really like it. I'm really happy. And then I decided, alright, let's test my mental fortitude by trying to make something tiny, because we have a resizing tool, so I could put in a lot of detail. Yeah, I even made the buttons on like the parking lots or parking cart box system. You can even make the buttons. And I was really happy with it. And I mean the buttons for like when you need to pay with like credit card or like card. and I was just really happy. You couldn't resize the screens though, so the screen on there is fake, but the buttons are also fake because this is a completely useless building. Like, the peeps are never going to use this, but it works for like the slight realism that I want to bring to Mythos, where yes, because it's a theme park, there's going to be a parking lot where you need to have like a parking cart that you need to pay for and such, and you will have those machines along the route to the entrance, or like just on the route between the parking lot and the entrance, and you will have them at the entrance, or at least that's what makes sense to me, to also have them at the entrance itself. Because maybe you have not parked your car far enough that you would actually pass by the parking cart machines on the way to the entrance, if that makes sense. I don't think any of this voiceover made sense. Like, there's small bits that made sense, but mostly it was just chaos. Like, if your brain hasn't melted at this point by just the idiocracy and chaos of this voiceover, kudos to you. Also, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. That, I don't know why I immediately was just like, yeah, let's do that. But anyways, back to the actual parking cart machines, or parking machines. I don't know what the name for these things are actually, but you can also resize signs, which is amazing. And they actually now have like a sign or like letters that don't have a backing. Like, you don't have to sink in a sign and hide the backing and just have the words, which is amazing for these things, where you just want letters. You just want parking tickets. Parking ticket machine, is that it, the name of it? I don't know. Let me know down below in the comments what the actual name of these machines are. But again, I'm just really happy with how it all turned out. Like, I keep saying, oh yeah, I'm really happy. Because I am. And I'm not going to shove my happiness away. Because if you're not proud of things, then you get very sad. So be proud of your own achievements. No matter how small they may seem at the time, just be proud of them. Because there will come a time where you will actually look back and think, I thought those things were really small, but with hindsight, those were pretty big achievements. And then you get all happy and fuzzy inside. Anyways, so then the last thing that we're actually building today is a giant book. Why? Because it's Mythos. As I said, it's about mythology, folk legends and such. So the entire theme is basically just like a giant book of mythology and stories and all that opens up to you. That's the entire thing. So it makes sense to have like a giant book at the entrance. And then I immediately realized, like, Mythos as a name, like, usually you have a sign at the entrance of theme park with the name like in giant letters. Mythos didn't have that so far. And then I thought, oh yeah, there's this giant book. I can make giant letters on the giant book that spell out Mythos. And then we have like a proper entrance. And of course also probably like a photo moment. Because you will also want to have those where it's like, what's the proper word for it? Like photogenic places where it's just like a really pretty view or something like that. Because social media is everywhere now. And it's like, oh yeah, that's why the weenies are there. And there's a lot of things that are also just big photo moments that you have to kind of think about. Also, weenies are just pretty. And they're great ways to find your way around the theme park. Not just weenies, but just points of interest. But we will get into that probably some other time, because the video is almost done and I don't want to start a new subject. So, anyways, I had a giant book with Mythos, and then I actually made it kind of float in front of the book, kind of realistically with like a backing to it. But again, I keep saying, oh, I really like how it turned out. But again, I'm just really proud of how it turned out, especially considering this was like my second build. Because I made one version of the entrance that didn't go beyond like the actual entrance points. And then I redid the entrance, and that's the version that you see right now. And for this, like, this just feels so egomaniac-y. I don't know what the proper way of structuring that sentence was, but it feels bad in a way to say it. But I'm really proud that for like my second build ever in Planet Coaster 2, for it to already look like this, I'm just very proud of it. And I know for sure that it will probably get a lot better, and then like in maybe like a few months, maybe even next month, I will already look at the entrance and be like, yeah, I could improve this. But now I'm very happy in it, and I'm going to cherish that. Anyway, that's it for today's video. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. If you want to see more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. There's also channel memberships, but anyways, have a wonderful day, guys. Bye bye.